Welcome back, everybody. Let's begin our overview of the Renaissance for English literature. And the dates here again are just kind of rough guidelines. Have to keep that in mind. So, when we hear the word Renaissance, what it means rebirth. And what is being reborn is the classical ideals of ancient Greece and ancient Rome. So anytime you hear the word classics, that's what it's referring to, ancient Greece, ancient Rome. And when we think about the Renaissance, oftentimes what pops into our minds are the beautiful paintings, right? The visual arts and imagery, sculpture, things like that. In England, the Renaissance is remembered for not just the visual arts, but also the contributions and achievements regarding to politics, religion, as well as literature. So the Renaissance has its roots in the Middle Ages when the Crusades were going on. That with the traveling back and forth, right? Opened things up. People got off the feudal manners and led to the very slow death of feudalism. The Crusades reflect the great power of the church as well. One of the things as we saw in our look in Chaucer, how greedy and corrupt the church had become, and then the little cities that start to pop up along the crusade routes and then start to grow. One of the most important inventions is the printing press. When the printing press reached England, it changed daily life. The first book that was printed, of course, was the Bible, and it was translated into English and not just Latin. So people have a reason to read, and then other books slowly start to become printed as well. This leads to growth in education because, before there's really very few books, so there's really no point in becoming literate, becoming educated. But now education becomes more important and it starts to further upset the social order as the middle class grows. Now, this is significant. For the first time, English as well as French is taught to nobility. Not too many people know this today, but if you were to go and speak with the king or the feudal lord in the Middle Ages, they'd be speaking French. They didn't learn, they didn't know English because that's what the commoners spoke. So that's what's good about that. And then the middle class, we have money to buy books. And then the bottom bullet point. In the Renaissance, this is when we have the move from loud to silent reading. What this means is before, because of the very few number of people who were literate, right? If someone was reading, they would read aloud. And here's something that's crazy, but it's true, y'all. Even if you were reading by yourself, say for example you were a monk or a nun in your cell and you were reading the Bible, you would read it out loud to yourself. Because before the Renaissance, reading was allowed. There's accounts of people walking past classrooms and the students were sitting there reading and everybody was reading aloud. And the person who saw this said it reminded them of a hive of bees. It was just a loud buzzing noise because everybody was reading aloud. But in the Renaissance, we moved to silent reading, which is really interesting because today when we read silently. But before the Renaissance, even if you were alone, you would read aloud, which is really, really interesting. Okay, so meanwhile, let's have a little history break. As we end the Middle Ages, the medieval period, England got into a really bad civil war that's called the War of the Roses. And in case you're curious, why is it called the War of the Roses? The principal families that were involved in the Civil War each had a rose as on their crest, but the roses were different colors. It's not going to be on any exam, just in case you're curious. So what's important is that King Henry VII, who's our first Tudor king, in 1485 comes to power and ends the Civil War. He centralizes power and he strengthens the monarchy. And after this point, feudalism, lords, vassals, the three estates, all that stuff is gone. Also, there's no freedom of speech. So if you say something bad against the king in public, then it could come and get you and throw you in jail. Yeah, not nice. And the court, and by court here, we're talking about the king's court, becomes the center of culture as well as power. So what does it mean to become the center of culture? This is when people, the wealthy, would emulate in dress as well as language and behavior what the king and the queen and all the courtiers and the hangers-on around the king and the queen were doing. They start to dress that way and act that way and talk that way. London. During this time, London's population undergoes a mind-boggling explosion. In 30 years, its population doubles, which is just crazy. In one generation, the population doubles. And here's another crazy stat. In the 17th century, 1 out of every 8 English citizens lived in London at least once in his or her lifetime. So London is not only the capital of England, but it's the center of England, meaning that everything is coming out of London. It's the place for business, for trading, because of where it is on the river. It's the place to be. And we'll continue with our overview of the Renaissance and English literature in the next lecture.